"I'm exhausted." It wasn't a line from a script, not a dramatic moment written for television, but something far more real, and far more unsettling. When Sam Heughan said those words while reflecting on the ending of Outlander, it didn't sound like an actor finishing a role. It sounded like someone who had been carrying something heavy for far longer than anyone realized. And for fans who had always seen him as strong, steady, almost unbreakable, that moment felt like a crack in an image that had never wavered before. For years, Outlander wasn't just a show, it was a defining chapter of Sam's life, one that shaped how the world saw him and, in many ways, how he saw himself. His portrayal of Jamie Fraser became more than a performance, it became a presence that followed him everywhere, through interviews, public appearances, and even the quiet expectations placed on him by fans. The character was admired for strength, resilience, and unwavering loyalty, and over time, those qualities became inseparable from the man behind the role. But what happens when the line between character and reality starts to blur? At first, the signs were easy to miss. Long filming schedules, physically demanding scenes, constant travel, and the pressure to deliver emotional depth season after season, these were all part of the job, expected and accepted. Sam handled it the way he always had, with professionalism and a quiet determination that made everything look effortless. But behind that consistency, something was building, something that didn't show up in polished interviews or red carpet smiles. As the series moved closer to its conclusion, the emotional weight began to shift. It wasn't just about finishing a story anymore, it was about letting go of something that had defined nearly a decade of his life. In recent conversations, Sam began to hint at this in subtle ways, describing the experience as both incredible and draining, words that didn't seem contradictory at first, but carried a deeper meaning when placed side by side. Because sometimes, the most meaningful journeys are also the ones that take the most out of you. Then came the moment that changed how fans understood everything. When he openly admitted feeling exhausted, it wasn't framed as a complaint or a moment of weakness, it was honest, almost reflective, as if he was finally allowing himself to say something he had been holding back for years. He spoke about the intensity of staying in that world for so long, about the emotional demands of revisiting heavy storylines, and the physical toll of maintaining a character that required constant strength. But what made his words resonate wasn't just the exhaustion itself, it was what it represented. This wasn't simply about being tired from work, it was about reaching a point where something deeper needed to change. The repetition, the expectations, the responsibility of carrying such a beloved character, all of it had quietly accumulated over time. And now, as the end approached, it was finally being acknowledged. Fans began looking back at past interviews, noticing moments that suddenly felt different in hindsight. Small pauses, careful wording, the way he sometimes shifted conversations away from certain topics, it all started to form a pattern. It became clear that this wasn't a sudden realization, but a gradual one, something that had been developing beneath the surface long before it was spoken out loud. What added another layer to the story was the contrast between how things appeared and how they felt. On screen, Jamie Fraser remained as strong and unwavering as ever, leading, fighting, loving with the same intensity that had defined him from the beginning. But off-screen, the person behind that character was beginning to feel the weight of sustaining that image for so long. And that contrast made the moment of honesty even more powerful. Then came a detail that shifted everything from simple exhaustion to something more complex. Sam hinted that it wasn't just the role itself, but the process of stepping away from it that felt overwhelming. Letting go isn't always a relief, sometimes it's a loss, especially when what you're leaving behind has become such a significant part of your identity. And in that space between holding on and letting go, emotions tend to surface in ways that are hard to fully explain. That's when fans realized this wasn't just about the end of a show. It was about the end of a version of Sam Heughan that they had come to know so well. The exhaustion wasn't just physical or emotional, it was tied to something deeper, something connected to change, to uncertainty, to the question of what comes next when something so defining finally reaches its end. And as those words continued to echo, "I'm exhausted," they stopped sounding like a simple statement and started feeling like a turning point. Because sometimes, when someone finally admits they're tired, it's not just about needing rest. It's about standing at the edge of something new, even if they're not entirely sure what that is yet. As the reality of Outlander coming to an end settled in, Sam Heughan's words began to take on an even deeper meaning. It wasn't just about exhaustion anymore, it was about what that exhaustion was tied to. Because when he spoke further about the final chapter of the series, it became clear that what he was experiencing wasn't relief in the way people expected. It was something far more complicated, something caught between closure and quiet loss. He described the ending not as a clean break, but as an emotional unraveling of everything he had built over the years. Jamie Fraser wasn't just a role he could step out of at the end of a filming day. It had become part of his rhythm, his identity, the way he connected with audiences across the world. And now, with that chapter closing, there was an emptiness that came with it, a space where something once constant would no longer exist. For many actors, finishing a project is a transition, but for him, it felt more like saying goodbye to a version of himself. What surprised fans most was how openly he acknowledged that contradiction. On one hand, there was a sense of pride, of having completed a journey that few actors ever get to experience, of bringing a character to life across so many years with consistency and depth. But on the other hand, there was uncertainty, a question that lingered beneath everything else: who is he without Jamie Fraser? It wasn't fear in a dramatic sense, but a quiet, reflective uncertainty that made the moment feel incredibly real. He hinted at something that many people don't often consider: the difficulty of redefining yourself after being so closely associated with one role. When a character becomes iconic, it doesn't just shape public perception, it shapes opportunity, expectation, and even self-perception. Moving beyond that isn't just about choosing new roles, it's about rediscovering a sense of direction that isn't tied to what came before. And that process, as he suggested, doesn't happen overnight. There were also moments where his tone shifted, becoming more introspective, almost hesitant. He spoke about needing time, not just to rest physically, but to recalibrate mentally and emotionally. After years of constant movement, constant engagement, constant expectation, the idea of stepping back wasn't just appealing, it felt necessary. Not as an escape, but as a way to understand what comes next without the noise that had surrounded him for so long. Fans, once again, found themselves divided in how they interpreted this phase. Some saw it as a well-deserved pause, a moment of reflection that would eventually lead to something new and exciting. Others felt a deeper sense of uncertainty, wondering if this marked a more permanent shift away from the kind of roles that had made him so beloved. And in that tension, the conversation grew more emotional, more personal, because it wasn't just about his future, it was about what his journey meant to those who had followed it from the beginning. What makes this moment so compelling is how unfinished it feels. There's no clear next step, no immediate announcement of a new project that defines the direction forward. Instead, there's space, intentional, open, and uncertain. And while that uncertainty can feel uncomfortable, it also holds a different kind of possibility, one that isn't shaped by expectation but by choice. Sam didn't frame the ending of Outlander as a final chapter in his career, but he also didn't rush to define what comes after. He left it open, almost deliberately, as if allowing himself the freedom to evolve without needing to explain it immediately. And in doing so, he shifted the narrative from one of endings to one of transformation. Because maybe this isn't about losing something, it's about making room for something that hasn't taken shape yet. And while no one knows exactly what that will look like, one thing is certain: the version of Sam Heughan that emerges from this moment won't be the same as the one we've known before.